Whenever you are ready, as long as it's in the next 30 seconds.
Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about the Every Child Deserves a Family Act. And so basically what it is, it's an act that allows people who are LGBT or non-binary or gender non-conforming to be qualified to adopt foster children. And even though we have same-sex marriage rules now and it's legal in every single country, every single state, we still have a lot of laws that prohibit people who aren't cisgender and who aren't heterosexual from having the same rights as someone who is heterosexual and cisgender. And so my claim is that allowing LGBT families to adopt foster youth makes for a bigger pool, it makes a better impact for the foster care system. And my first point is that allowing LGBT families to be qualified to adopt foster youth makes a bigger pool for homeless kids, for foster kids to find safe homes, because there's a large group of underutilized foster homes that foster youth can be allocated to. And the only reason that they aren't is because a lot of people who are same-sex couples are deemed unqualified because of their sexual orientation. And having safe spaces like that for people who, let's say you're a foster youth and you already are, let's say, queer or transgender or, gender non-conforming, and if you go into a house where that's not allowed or you're gonna face violence, it becomes a problem. So having the option to move in with somebody or live with somebody who understands you lowers the rate of violence against queer youth. And there's already a lack of homes that foster youth can move into. So there's already a lot of kids who, what happens to them is once they turn 18 and they're out of the foster care system, they have nowhere to go. And the problem with that is there's so many homes that are available, but the only problem is that they're same-sex, so they're unqualified. And so my second point was, the reason I say that specifically the Every Child Deserves a Family Act should be passed is because it creates a federal law rather than the little state laws that we have in place right now. Because as of right now, there's only a handful of states that allow same-sex couples to adopt children. And the problem with that is that even those laws are kind of shaky, so there's like loopholes, there's ways to get around that, there's ways for foster care systems to still be like, they don't want to let these kids out to same-sex couples. And so what a federal law does is it makes it a general rule for everyone who lives in America, for everyone who's receiving financial aid from the government for these foster homes, to follow the rules and let same-sex couples adopt children. And my third point was that having a law in place for that removes the discrimination and the false ideas people have about same-sex couples and LGBT families. And the reason for that is because same-sex couples have been shown that they don't have any different effect on children than heterosexual couples. And in an elongated study observing lesbian parents compared to heterosexual parents, the outcome of the children was exactly the same. And the reason for that is just because it doesn't matter what the sexual orientation or gender identity of the parents are, but it matters more about the financial stability, the relationship with the parents, the economic standing, and everything like that. And there was a report written by Dr. Siegel and the American Academy of Pediatrics that showed that sexual orientation and gender identity have nothing to do with the outcome of a child, but it's like it has more to do with how the child was raised, regardless of who raised them. And to back that up, there's also just evidence of people who are already raising kids who are in same-sex marriages, and there hasn't been any evidence to show that, because there's like, so there's already evidence to show that there's nothing wrong with same-sex couples, and so a lot of people, a lot of foster care youth, what ends up happening to them is if they get aged out, or even if they're like queer youth, a lot of things that happen to them is if they have violence in their home, they usually run away from home, and yeah, they could have been put in like a same-sex family, and that's it.
All right, Marisol, the proposition is a little bit complicated the way you've expressed it, and I think you need to simplify it a bit. There is no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be at the beginning of the speech, so I don't know exactly how it's going to progress. At the beginning, you do suggest that there is a controversy because even though same-sex marriages have been approved and are now legal, that there continue to be problems with foster care and those who are not cis-identified, that sort of thing. And I'm going, okay, well, that sounds like the start of an argument, and then there's no information on that at all. You assert all of these things. You don't have an example of somebody. You've got a hypothetical about, well, what if a kid who's gay or queer ends up with violence at home, and then there's no foster family for them to go to? And I'm going, well, what if there is? Where's your proof that there isn't a foster family for them to go to? Or, for instance, that same-sex couples are prohibited from serving as foster care families. Even if there's not a law, rule, policy, or procedure that you can document, there might be cases that you could look at and say, here is an example, or here are some instances where those children were denied an opportunity to be with a family that would have cared for them. And then at least we'd have some anecdotes to support this. But at best, we've got a hypothetical here, and that is not convincing at all. So there is just a big chunk of information here that's missing, and it's the main presupposition that your whole argument rests on. It seems to suggest that that a problem exists, and I'm looking for proof of that particular problem, and I don't see it. All I've got is a hypothetical problem that might exist. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but it does mean that there's not any proof that it exists here. The second point is a little bit different because you do have some information that you're showing that suggests that there isn't any particular harm of same-sex couples or other LGBT-oriented folks having problems with taking care of foster children or adopting or any of those kinds of things. And you do have some information that you present here, although your source citations consist of a study and there's evidence. We got one direct quote from Dr. Segal, and even that, it wasn't really a direct quote. It sounds like it's kind of a paraphrase or summary of what's being said there. And all of that comes with only 2 minutes left in the speech. It's like the first 4 minutes of the speech, there wasn't any information in the speech at all. There wasn't any proof. And then the last 2 minutes, we got this kind of information, which I think is a little bit underwhelming on that particular point. But of course, it doesn't matter if, in fact, people have access to these things. Now, you're arguing here's the reason that people are prejudiced against it and therefore they don't have access. I'm saying give me the other information first. And then the third point says it removes discrimination, and I'm going, well, where's the proof that there is discrimination? Again, I'm not saying that there isn't discrimination. I'm just saying I don't have any proof that there is discrimination. I don't have any reason to believe that what you've said is happening because I don't have an example. There's not a social worker who says, I've got kids that I can't place anywhere because the courts won't allow, or my supervisor won't let me do this kind of thing, or foster families are unwilling to do these kinds of things. If this is a real thing, then somebody has talked about it, somebody's written about it, and you could be quoting those people to build your argument. And I didn't hear any of that information. So I think that that's the big problem that we've got going on here. And I was making a joke about using the phone before as a source. It's using the technology of the laptop. That's a little iffy. You can see why the phone use is problematic. You look like you're paying attention to your phone. It's almost like, are you texting while we're watching you give the speech? And I know you're not doing that. I know that you're trying to look at your notes there, but that small little thing in your hand, I guess I'm just not used to the idea that that's the equivalent of a note card, because when the phone is in your hand, just makes me think like I'm watching somebody who's engaged in social media as opposed to somebody who's giving a speech. So I probably would skip that in the future, folks. I think I now understand why that's a problem a little bit more. All right, thank you.